Risking your life for fear of looking stupid is... for fear of looking stupid. Being stupid for fear of looking stupid. Doesn't make any sense, and it's not freedom. So we'll see if this video turns into anything. I've got a long bike ride ahead of me back to Frankfurt. I was just out getting an MRI, and I could only get an appointment about an hour away from Frankfurt, where I live, and I figured I'd use the ride back to talk about some things that have been on my mind recently. I'm sure the sound of the wind is not going to be very helpful, but we'll see if this video can be used for anything. It's a beautiful day. The skies are fairly clear. I saw some trails up there today, but for the most part, it's just wonderful. Right now, I'm under a row of linden trees, and they smell wonderful. I've talked about linden trees in a past video, which I will link to. And obviously, anyone interested in the Oera Linda will be either familiar with linden trees or will become eventually familiar with the name. The thing that I've had on my mind recently is freedom. Freias. Everything in the book about the people that are written about in the manuscript revolves around the concept of freedom, FRYDOM. And given the state of the world today, hang on, I've got to figure out where I'm going here. I've not been here before, except on the way down. I think this is right. So, the concept of freedom is, in the world today, given the state of affairs, a questionable concept, maybe. I mean, America calls itself the land of the free, but what does that even mean? If I think about life in Europe, in many ways, it's more free than life in the United States. And I'll explain what I mean, I guess, if I can articulate what I'm trying to say. Certainly when you think of Europe, freedom is not what comes to mind if you're an American. I think Europeans would see it differently, depending where you're at, given the Protestant Reformation, things like that. Hi. Ich muss mal irgendwie gucken, wo ich durchkomme. Ich will die Frau nicht. Dankeschön. You know, the northern part of Europe freed itself from the Catholic Church. I think Catholics would think of themselves as having freed this part of the world from not hedonism, heathenism, paganism. I think I'm going the right way here. But that's the cool thing about freedom. I've got free time. I've got a free day. I took off work today. So let's start there. I had to take off work to keep this appointment today. And so I have a free day, but I needed permission to take advantage of the free day. Yeah, this looks right. So there's some right there. I'm free today, but within that freedom is there's I can't think of the word right now. There's an implication of non-freedom. I had to ask permission to have the day free. By the way, I saw this on the way up here. We all know that the six-spoke wheel is the symbol of Vralda. So this is the Nidar River, and we'll see if I can continue. I don't know how much or how little of what I've been saying on this attempt at a video has been recorded. It's going to be very difficult to know where to stop and where to start, because I don't want to keep repeating myself, but if I leave things out, then no one's going to understand what I'm talking about. So I may have to give up on this whole operation. At any rate, the topic is freedom. And basically the idea of intrinsic and extrinsic freedom, and defining what freedom is, especially in this modern age where, the post-Crowleyan world where do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law is seen as some kind of a spiritual awakening. Whereas laws are experienced by most people as something that limits them. In the Freya worldview, there's no difference between an extrinsic and an intrinsic law, because the word for law and the word for the knowledge of right and wrong in your heart are the same, Eva. There's no differentiation between the two in the Freya worldview. And that means that even though there are characters in the Oera Linda Book who experienced in their youth, who talked about experiencing the laws as limitations in their youth and eventually coming to understand their value and being thankful for them, the stark differentiation that we have nowadays, where a law is just something to be subverted, or at best followed to keep yourself out of trouble. That doesn't exist in the, it would be difficult, it would be almost impossible to express in the language of the Freya, because they don't have a separate word for law. The word seed, or tradition, is just a forerunner, a lesser kind of a rule. Whereas when something becomes a law in Eva, it's basically it's natural law. It's Eva means law, as well as the natural inclination towards right and wrong, as well as forever. Right, the word ever comes from Eva, as well as the word even, which is mentioned in the Oera Linda. Even, Eva, so placidity, the state of still water, is Eva as well. So it's this state of equanimity. And so that's what law, so the law, word for law and the word for equanimity are the same. There's no conflict there between following the law and feeling at peace with yourself. And that's a big difference nowadays. I mean, I know I have been a flouter of laws throughout my life. When I thought something was unnecessary to follow, I just wouldn't follow it. From speeding rules to, smoking weed, or drinking underage. You can come up with a million examples yourself of laws that you, jaywalking, all kinds of stuff that you just didn't follow. But the question is, yes, you were free not to follow those laws, but if you got caught, there would have been consequences for it. So what is freedom then? Is it the ability to flout the law? Is it living a lawless existence? Would ultimate freedom be freedom from all rules and regulations? I don't think so. I mean, I look at kind of scofflaws, people who really make a career out of not following different laws. And I really don't want them to be in charge. Looks like it's still recording. Gonna stop here. Or I think of the times when I was, how many degrees of freedom I have enjoyed, and the consequences for me physically, like today. The whole reason I'm on this bike trip is that I had to go to an MRI appointment for my hip. I had the freedom to live my life the way that I lived it. And there were consequences, and they were not, a lot of them are not good. The state of my physical health, the state of my financial health, these are all things that are results of me living a quote-unquote free life, but I'm limited by the consequences of them now. So in the search for absolute freedom, really, just going against what people would consider like a normal way of life. I destroyed my, parts of my body. I failed to create or garner wealth, and now the consequences are that I've got severe limitations. I'm able to ride a bicycle, but I'm not really able to walk. And even I went to a surgeon 2 weeks ago, and he said he couldn't fix my hip. It's too messed up, so I've got to find someone else. So my options are limited into what I can even make out of this existence that I've cultivated for myself through what I thought was freedom. And so it's an important question when you look at things that way. Like, I don't know, there's this bicycle path right here, and I'd be free to keep going straight right now. I would end up in the river. That would be the consequence, but nobody's going to stop me from doing it. So there's this compromise, there's this adherence to a certain degree of non-freedom in order to preserve the greater part of freedom. This is an interesting little part of the river here. This is like the last little natural waterfall before the river empties into the mine. Once again, the stupid video was paused, so I have no idea what I've been recording and what not. But the topic was kind of the illusion of freedom as being something that is that implies a lack of regulation. If I ride my bicycle into the river, or if I fail to duck my head at this bridge, which I'm free to do, well, there's going to be consequences that I'm not going to like very much. They're not going to foster any sort of freedom going forward. But that freedom would result in severe limitations. And that's just part of natural law. There is no freedom without limitations. I guess you could say there's no limitations without some degree of freedom as well, but for the most part, you can limit freedom to the point where it's almost non-existent, but you cannot live you can't live without any regulation and expect freedom to persist. Limitations are there to protect freedom. That's why there's no word in the Fraya language for law other than Eva, which is the intrinsic sense of right and wrong. And if something's wrong, well, you can still do it. You have the freedom to do it. Vralda is your will is free, but that doesn't mean that doing wrong is going to increase your range of freedom. Like this bike path, someone put it here, right? Someone had to pay for it. So someone's freedom was, I don't want to say infringed upon, but there was some agreement somewhere, some compromise where someone said, okay, I'm willing to give up something in order to get something that is going to expand freedom in many ways. And the fact that I can ride through the city and go get my MRI and without really almost ever having to encounter any traffic other than bicycle traffic and pedestrian traffic, and I can be out here in the compromised version of nature. Well, that's a huge amount of freedom, and it didn't come on its own. It's not natural law that this path is here. Natural law would be that this was all overgrown and inaccessible, right? But we as humans decided that we're going to limit our own personal sphere of whimsy in order to create something that is going to foster a feeling of and a utility of freedom. So I think I have to cross this bridge here. I may not have to, but I think it's nicer on the other side. And from here on, oh no, I guess I do have to. See, I had the freedom. I could have just gone through that field there, but what would that have done for me? I'd have got bogged down in the grass and ruined other people's picnic and whatever. So here we go. Ah, yes, I've been here. Yeah, so that's my take on absolute freedom. It just doesn't exist. Absolute slavery may exist. Absolute freedom is an illusion. It would be a bad thing. It would just be the law of the jungle, whatever. And nobody wants that. The closer it gets to absolute freedom, it seems the more chaotic things become.
Ja,
Dankeschön.
auf jeden Fall.
So now I've got to figure out. I think I need to go this way. Whimsy is a word that I think of when I think of the Crowleyan version of freedom. Do what thou wilt. Do what thou wilt. Shall be the whole of the law. So we end up mistaking freedom. I'm gonna take a little break here because I can't really feel. I can't really feel all my parts down here. Sitting on this seat is, the ability to take this bike tour frees me from having to go to the Frankfurt train station, which is just a horrible red light district and somewhere I don't want to be, especially on a beautiful day like today. But yeah, there's consequences. I'm also quite tired now. It's the afternoon. I was out, the MRIs because my body is messed up, and here I am. Going above and beyond physically, but yes, I was here today. I think I have to go all the way around this way. Where was I? Whimsy. So the concept of freedom is being confused with whimsy. Whatever whim you have, follow it. And that's not freedom. That is chaos. You can't have freedom where there's chaos. You have to have order. Order and freedom go together. And the way the world works nowadays is just people. I think the young generation, maybe, it's always that way. When I was young, I did all kinds of stupid stuff. I mean, the reason my body is so messed up is because I thought I was living freedom, and I was living a disordered life. I was abusing myself, not even with bad stuff, drugs and alcohol. I have had my fair share of those things too, but the reality is that I was ignoring people's advice, even when it came to things that we consider healthy, just doing too much. And older people would warn me, and I would say to myself, they have no idea what they're talking about. Those old farts telling me to slow down, telling me to be careful. Like today, it's funny, I wore a helmet on the way down, and I forgot to put it on the way back because I'm not used to wearing a helmet. For years, I used to skate in traffic with zero protective gear, and nothing bad really ever happened. But the older I get, the more I realize the fragility of life, so I try to be more careful. And there's statistics and stuff that tell you should wear a bicycle helmet, and ignoring that, you're free to, but the consequences could be devastating. And that's a lesson that I should have learned by now. So I actually brought the bicycle helmet with me today for such a long trip, but now on the way back I just didn't even put it on. But I'll stop here and put it on and be a good boy. Now, risking your life for fear of looking stupid is... for fear of looking stupid. Being stupid for fear of looking stupid. Doesn't make any sense, and it's not freedom. Because if I fall and bust my head, I'm going to be free to maybe wiggle my toes. So let's see if I can keep this thing going without turning it off again. So I'm most of the way back already, actually. we were talking about the concept of freedom. In Frankfurt, you're free to have your dog off the leash in a park, which is kind of cool. But of course, it's also dangerous. But when my dog could still run around like that, we had him insured, just in case he did something stupid, which he often did. And now he's old and he can't move anymore, so we just took him off the insurance policy. But so freedom, if people say freedom ain't free, right? They're talking about, some kind of redneck notion of defending your freedom with firearms and extreme prejudice. But the truth of the matter is that there's always a trade-off. I think that is probably a better definition of freedom ain't free. There's a trade-off. There's always going to be consequences to anything you do, and ultimately you're going to run up against natural law if you're not breaking any civil statutes. At some point you're going to run up against the gravity or solidity or whatever natural things are out there to stop you in your tracks if need be. And if you look online, there's plenty of examples of people literally just running up against natural law because they're too caught up in their own idea of living free to understand the consequences of their actions. And I'm not accepting myself from that. I think it's probably human nature to strive towards more freedom, and that's why we have to have laws, Eva, in order to protect us from ourselves in many ways. I mentioned before that I had not built any wealth. I don't know if it was recorded or not, but that was one of the things that I have said on this trip, that I've lived such a free life that I've destroyed parts of my body and failed to garner any appreciable assets. And the trade-off has been I do things like this. I take an afternoon and before I was working for someone else, when I was self-employed, I could do this anytime I wanted, which is one of the reasons I didn't garner any wealth, because I'd much rather spend a day having a bike tour, even if it is to get medical treatment. Rather take a bike than go down and experience the train station. And I'm not saying that I regret it. I really don't in many ways. I feel rich, even though I know that's kind of a delusion. I'm deluding myself. I'm not rich. I have nothing. I have zero money. Negative money, matter of fact. I had to overdraw my account just to get the short train ticket that I got today for 12 euros. I had to overdraw my account to do that, and I'm going to go buy a little food on the way home too. Just a little, just enough for today. And so I've had to overdraw my account just to be able to eat. And it's, we're halfway through the month, so I'm in pretty bad shape there, but I feel rich. I feel like the ability to just be here where I am is valuable somehow. And a lot of people will say I'm stupid, and probably, they're right also in many ways. I don't own any of this stuff. I'm borrowing it, but it's being lent to me. So I'm going to take a different way home. I've never gone up this path here today, but I think I figured out where it goes as I was coming down today. So let's see how this works out. I think I cut off one more street here, and so I wouldn't want to trade this somehow for money, because I've been with people who have money. I know people who have money, and they don't have time for this. They don't have time for anything. And so there's a certain amount of freedom that comes from not being part of the rat race. But of course, in the end, I'm limited, because, if I had money, I would have a place to live, and, I've got an apartment that I pay rent on, and I've been able to pay the rent, but just barely. And I know people who, have houses free and clear at my age, and cars, and, the bicycle I'm riding is not even mine, it's my wife's. We share a bicycle. So there's trade-offs. Being free ain't free. But being rich ain't free either, is it? And even being semi-well-to-do ain't free. So here I can also make another decision. I could go down the road that way. Out here I've got a green light. I might as well take advantage of it. There's so many things that I'm unable to enjoy, but one of the things that I tell myself that maybe is also just a cop-out or a justification is that if I think I had access to more, this light is not going to turn green because I haven't pushed on the little button there and I can't reach it. So I'm going to take advantage of my freedom to go across the red light. So there we have our intrinsic freedom and our extrinsic freedom. I don't feel like I've broken an EVA in that case just because the pedestrian light was red. I don't know. You tell me in the comments if I'm now taking advantage of my freedom for evil purposes. But I think if I did have access to money and cars and houses and the things that allow you to access other things, I might have gone off the deep end. That's one of the things. A lot of my friends have been very successful, and I think just possibly if I had been as successful as some of my friends, that I would have been a complete mess, because I'm a mess already, right? Even with no access to anything, I've definitely figured out ways to do stupid stuff. And the more, if I had kind of dedicated my life to pursuing the means to do things that I want to do, then It's like the Oera Linda says, you know, where does evil come from? It comes from yourselves, and you know, all the things that you want. It's all of these desires that you have. The Buddha says the same thing. You know, desire is the root of all suffering. And if I look at all of the suffering that I do nowadays, it certainly is tied to my desires, but at least my desires were not of a material nature, so that I didn't gather the means to pursue my desires even more. You know, some of my baser desires, I'd probably be on my third wife and you know, fourth lawsuit. Who knows? If I was one of these jet set types. And you know, I've known a lot of jet set types. I worked in the investment banking industry. I worked in Washington for a while. I know jet set. And there was a time when I really, really wanted to be like that. And there was some kind of governor in me that always said, you know, the governor, maybe the word for the governor is laziness. You know, I couldn't be bothered to do all the things that you need to do in order to be a super success, quote unquote. So I didn't. Let me see if this thing is even still recording, or whether I'm just talking to myself again. Seem to be talking to myself. All right, let's continue on. I'm close to home now. It's been quite a long day. It took me, I don't know how long it took me to ride back. It took me about an hour and a half to get down there. Seemed shorter on the way back, but I also wasn't talking to myself on the way down, and I didn't know the way. And now on the way back, I avoided a bunch of construction sites and stuff that I met on the way down. So it was really a pleasant trip, and made much more pleasant by the fact that I know I was able to avoid some of the more unpleasant areas of the city that normally, if I would have just taken public transportation, I would have had to deal with. And you know, I don't walk very well. I can barely walk at all. And everyone stares at me, and so, you know, any criminal that's walking around is gonna see me first. So I definitely feel like it was a safer way to get down there. And now that I got my helmet on, like a good bike rider, I feel a little bit safer, you know, and that's freedom. That feeling of safety is also a very important part of being able to be free. You can't be free if you're constantly just in survival mode, and that's coming from a guy who is in survival mode pretty much all the time. But if you feel like you're so I should be in survival mode. I mean, I'm barely making ends meet, but some of the decisions I make just they take the edge off. They at least allowed me to delude myself that I'm okay, and then my radius becomes greater. You know, if I lived in the type of fear that usually goes along with the state of my health and finances, I don't know whether I'd be able to do anything. But that's this intrinsic and extrinsic freedom again, though. You know, extrinsically, my life is a complete mess. Anyone looking from the outside would say, how can anybody live that way? You know, unable to walk, nothing, own zero assets, and no ability to change that really at the moment. But intrinsically, you know, I know that the choices that I've made within myself, there's something right about them. It's a righteous path that I've taken, and I don't know where it's going to lead in the end. Sometimes I feel like, you know, I'm already at the end of it, but then a day like today, and you make a round trip and do something that is it's just it's not an everyday kind of a thing. A lot of people wouldn't do what I did today, and so I get this feeling that there's something right about what I'm doing, and the freedom that I've been given to make these choices, the cost that I've had to incur for them is not as great as it seems. And here we are at my place of employment. And so we've come full circle. And I thank you. We'll talk to you sometime soon.